Hello and welcome to Into the Digital Future. I'm Laura Higgins.
And I'm Jordan Shapiro. Laura, we are always talking about the importance of youth voices in shaping the digital landscape.
Oh, absolutely, Jordan. It's a recurring theme in all of our discussions.
Well, today on Into the Digital Future, we have a guest who's not just talking about it, but actually making it happen on a global scale.
That's right. We're thrilled to welcome Lucy Thomas, the co-founder and CEO of Project Rockit, Australia's youth-driven movement against bullying, hate and prejudice.
Yeah, Lucy and her team are doing incredible work amplifying youth voices and tackling online safety issues from a completely different angle than the way that most people talk about it, than the things that we normally see.
Yeah, Jordan, I'm really excited to dive into how Project Rockit approaches online safety issues because it's quite different from the typical adult perspective that we often encounter.
That's right. She's going to prioritize the way that young people address the digital challenges, and it's going to be really eye opening because it's not just this focus on the big scary issues that adults are always focusing on, that the scare media is always focusing. This is the opposite of fear mongering.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget, Project Rocket isn't just operating in Australia. They've gone global now and they collaborate with international tech companies to really create meaningful change.
Yeah, and Lucy's going to give some fantastic advice in this conversation about how companies can genuinely involve youth in their processes, in their research and development. That it's not just that this is not just a tokenism, the token representation when they're like, well, we have one teenager on our advisory board.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also really looking forward to discussing the contrasting narratives that we see in youth engagement online, from those who are actively dismantling hierarchies to those who actually might be more vulnerable to radicalization.
Yeah, we had a real conversation about toward the end of the conversation we really get into this complex landscape, and Lucy brings an invaluable perspective. Plus, Lucy brings so much passion for empowering young people. It's really inspiring, don't you think?
Yeah, it really is. So whether you're a parent, educator, tech professional, or just someone interested in how young people are shaping our digital future, this episode is packed with insights that you won't want to miss.
So, if you're ready to challenge your assumptions about youth engagement in the digital world and to learn how we can create more inclusive online spaces, then come into this episode of Into the Digital Future. We've got Lucy Thomas from Project Rockit.
My name's Lucy Thomas, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Project Rockit, Australia's youth-driven movement against bullying, hate and prejudice.
I've known you for quite some time because in my previous work before I came to Roblox and still in my job, I work in anti-bullying. So we've met on many occasions and even been on boards together. But even before I knew you, this has always been your life passion. So before we get into what Project Rocket is, tell us about why getting into the anti-bullying stuff is so important to you.
Yeah, sure. So it does take me back, Laura. I feel like there are some people in the industry who have known me since I was very young, and that's quite vulnerable. Yeah, I've been working in this space since I finished school, and this has been my whole life and my whole career, and really my purpose and so much of my identity. And why is that? Well, growing up, my little sister and I were super close, and we had very different school experiences. But a common link for both of us was observing the way that bullying, I guess, and all of the umbrella of issues that fall under that banner really impacted the lives of our peers. And it actually affects everyone, not just those who are bullied, but those who see it happen, those who perpetrate it. We know that the long-term negative outcomes are terrible for everyone involved, but also it's entirely preventable. And the vast majority of young people care about the way that their peers are treated and care about values like kindness and respect. And our experience was one of growing up in school, giving a damn, but not having access to support or skills or even the confidence to do something about it. And so that's why shortly after finishing school, we got talking about the state of the world and how much more hopeful it would be if we had this really critical learning in school, and we emerged from school not just with a great score to get into university, solid literacy skills, but actually like self-literacy and literacy of diversity and literacy of how to build a positive online presence, all of these core skills and critical capabilities that we know are so essential for young people these days. And what was missing from the conversation at the time for us was any consultation or involvement from young people. When I was in school, you'd have the kind of police officer talk about cyber safety, or someone who'd overcome bullying to become an Olympic athlete. And those are really inspiring stories, but there was nothing actually peer-based, nothing peer-to-peer that looked at the genuine risks involved in challenging hate, and the fears that we might have, as well as like, I don't know, some tangible socially credible strategies for challenging bullying instead of standing by watching. And so, yeah, basically we just got started ourselves. It's called Project Rockit because we didn't really know what it was or where it was going. And so we just threw these two words together. After all, it was a community project. And I guess, 18 years on, here we are. We've Project Rockit's grown. We used a sustainable social enterprise model to become a youth employer and have positively impacted over 600,000 young Australians. It's wild. It's a wild ride.
I mean, it's incredible. And I want you to go into some detail about what how Project Rockit works. What it for our listeners, but actually, before you even do that, like, why do you think there's so much bullying? Like, why does it even exist? Like, why like it seems like it's everywhere, right? As you said, and it affects so many people. Like, do you have any guesses? Like why is it so prevalent?
Oh, mate, that's like the $1 million question, isn't it? I think we know that bullying is underpinned by a wrestling to have power, and that suggests to me, first of all, that this is about wielding unfair power from one person over another, but also that there are a whole bunch of people out there walking around in this world, moving through the world feeling powerless and thinking that the only way to gain that sense of empowerment is by dominating or subjugating another person, or in some cases an entire identity or community. So I think there's something there. What is it about our white Western reality, the dominant kind of social hierarchy that we move within, that says that is powerful? And I think one of the things that excites me about this emerging generation is I think they're very actively dismantling those kind of power structures. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Of course, part of that is that idea that being different is somehow the most obvious reason that there's something wrong with you, and that it's the easy passage to dominating another person if they're different to us. But yeah, and I think increasingly we're seeing that our conversations are becoming more and more polarized, which is in fact only heightening that need for power and heightening that fear of those who are different to us, which is really disarming. But yeah, as I said, I reckon the next gen is acutely aware of those dynamics and those politics as well.
So as Jordan said, like Project Rockit, it's more than just bullying now. We kind of have already outlined. I know when we first started working together all those years ago, and I have to give a shout out to your sister. Hey, Rosie, I know you're not here, but hey, my question is, one, how do you two manage to work together for so long? I love both of you. But yeah, also just Project Rockit went from this focus on bullying now to these much, much bigger topics. What does it look like now?
Yeah, it is interesting when you start out as such a grassroots community project, and really as a young person launching a project like ours, you're not trying to build a career, and you're certainly not trying to build a movement or an organization. And I think if we'd had that in mind, we probably both would have been too scared to get started. It was actually the smallness of the idea and how we could create community change one school at a time that really gripped our attention and got us excited. But yeah, I guess what started small has grown into a movement, and we've done that in a number of ways. For us, it was really important as we started to gain some distance from high school that we continued to utilize that youth-driven model. So we couldn't pass ourselves off as peers anymore. And so we started recruiting and hiring and training young people who, like us, share the vision of a world where kindness and respect thrive over bullying, hate, and prejudice. We knew there are plenty of young people out there, and increasingly, in fact, we now almost recruit directly from the school strike movement, because there are so many young people around the world mobilizing against these issues that affect their lives. And so we started hiring young people. And one thing I will name is a lot of the young people that we hire, it's really interesting to put a job out for a Project Rocket presenter role, because it's not like there are prerequisites. Most of the young people who we hire might have had a job at Macca's. They may have been the school drama captain, but they may not have had any other professional experience. What we do see is this great in-depth community involvement. They're recognized as leaders in their faith communities, or in their LGBTQIA student club, or in the social justice group at school. And so we're hiring these young people, and we send them out into schools all over the country to deliver really kind of wildly energetic workshops that really, they do tackle bullying, but really through a very strengths-based focus, this idea that we can build kind and inclusive communities at school and then online. And I think that's where Project Rocket's become something much bigger than an anti-bullying project, because what does it look like to build a kind and respectful world online? I think that's the question that a lot of us are grappling with, and where, again, young people's voices really need to be elevated into current conversations. So that's where we've come to play a really integral role to public policymakers. So, within Australia, to government, we work very, very closely with the e-safety commissioner, who actually has also been a mentor of ours as well. And of course with industry, so working with social media platforms, serving on their global safety advisories to elevate young people's voices into the decision makers' hands.
And just to say, for all of our listeners, you may have guessed by Lisa's accent, she is in Australia. She has just said that. We're also really proud that we did have the e-safety commissioner as a guest on one of our previous episodes in a previous season. So we do try to be as global as we can on this show. So yeah, more of that to come. Jordan, over to you, I think.
Well, I want to know, as you talk about hiring all these young people, as you talk about really amplifying youth voices, like what does that look like in a digital space? What do you train them to do? What do they do? How does it and how does that manifest in and impact other people? How would I be impacted if I were a young person? What would it look like?
Yeah, cool. Well, for starters, I think young people inherently approach issues of online safety and participation through a totally different lens to adults. We know that there's a really big gap. When adults talk about the top online issues that concern them, they often talk about quite severe, very risky, very significant, serious issues like, predators, child exploitation, major privacy breaches, this kind of thing. Very significant issues. However, young people, while they're concerned about these issues, they're much more keen to prioritize the lower level but more prevalent issues that they experience around respectful communication and peer-based abuse, and navigating boundaries and understanding consent, all of these much more nuanced relational issues online. And so what does it look like? Well, it means that the education you're receiving is actually presented to you in language that you can understand and in terms that you actually care about. And I think, we've taken a step further, acknowledging that our program presenters are aged 18 plus. We still think it's really important that we're actively centering school-aged young people, early social media users, and that's where we've convened a national youth collective of 13 to 19-year-olds, actually 12 to 19-year-olds, who guide my decision making as a CEO. They shape our program content, and they're also co-creating and co-designing digital resources that we're sharing into classrooms on a range of these issues in their own language, in their own terms, and in their own way as well, which is super cool.
And what's the tell me about some of them. What are some of the things that they present? How do they I mean, obviously in general terms, I don't want you to give away the farm.
Oh, there's honestly the nuance that they bring, and that they're brilliant. So one example is, we as adults talk extensively about the dangers of meeting strangers online. They've done a whole series on the positives of meeting strangers online and navigating risk and building critical literacy. When I say meeting strangers, I'm talking about strangers their own age, people that they've met through mutual friends. And there's one story of two of our creators who met and are now best friends, but they actually met through a WhatsApp group. And so some of these kinds of conversations, right through to navigating intimate image sharing. We've had young men talking about what is intimacy anyway, and why is it that in this day and age it feels so much easier to share an image that reveals a lot of yourself physically when it's so difficult to reveal yourself emotionally. So these are such, it blows my mind. They're fascinating kinds of issues. And we've had young women in the cohort also talking about how they didn't realize they were sharing intimate content because, you know, growing up as a young woman, when you're raised femme, you don't necessarily think about intimacy in the same way as young men might, or people of other genders. And so, yeah, really interesting context there. And it just continues. You know, we've had actually conversations that extend well beyond the online space into how we're learning at school, how we, you know, deconstructing power in classroom situations, knowing that, you know, this is a space where young people actually know more than adults, and how we're actually honoring that. So yeah, they're even speaking to the heart of like traditional classroom pedagogies, not just even about online safety. It's really cool.
That's really beautiful, beautiful, and you seem to be hinting at something that I like. I wonder you could say a few words about it, which is the dichotomy between sort of real life and virtual life when it comes to young people is not, it doesn't really quite work to talk about them as separate, right? At least that's my sense. You may know more than me. Like, is there a difference, or are we talking now about bullying that sort of crosses between these realms? And is just kind of a part of the lived experience.
Yeah, I think, you know, that idea that we could hold apart these two worlds has long and truly dissolved. And really interesting in the context of, you know, kind of around the world, we're currently seeing such heated discourse around, you know, the intersection between youth mental health and technology. And that's just one example where I think as adults, where, you know, we've got the conversation a little bit wrong in trying to separate and trying to say, you know, what are the forces online? What is it about our devices? What are the social media platforms need to do to create a healthier landscape, when actually the global landscape that young people are inheriting is inherently distressing and really challenging as well. So it's a good example. I think that we're seeing play out.
I 100% agree. As I mentioned earlier, spoiler, you know, Lucy and I go back years and years. In fact, just a small anecdote, but my birthday, probably, I don't know, 7 years ago or something, Lucy hired me on mariachi band to follow us around in a Mexican restaurant in San Francisco one time. That was a great day. That was a great day. Thank you. I will love you forever for that, Lucy. But
Cool.
aside from that, you know, I'm a huge fan of Project Rockit. Even the things you were talking about, you know, Jordan mentioned that he's a very successful author, by the way. But one of his books is about being a feminist dad. So even those topics you're talking about you need to go read that book. It's amazing. But these things are so important to us. Back to the whole point of Project Rockit, obviously you still have your mission and the work that you're doing, but it's already the amplification and the growth of what's happening outside of you. You know, I'm a big fan. I follow a lot of what your youth are doing and what happens next. And I've just seen like Push It Forward and some of your young people being involved in campaigns much bigger and outside of Project Rockit. There was one of your previous youth people who is now like a TV presenter and speaking on really important political topics. Like, the impact you guys are having is amazing. So I am slightly bringing it selfishly back to tech because I work for a tech company, and obviously our whole mission is about embracing youth and trying to get them involved. How do we do it in such a meaningful way that we can have that impact? I know it is, having a youth voice is really important, but how do we actually embed that in how we do everything as a company? How do we get them involved in actually changing things?
I think that's a great question. One that I wish was being asked in the public domain a lot more widely. The first thing I'd say, and it's a what not to do, but I'm just seeing it is so rife at the moment, is not to draw inferences from evidence or from young people's commentary just because it suits our political or commercial agendas. I think currently around the world, what I'm really seeing that's so frustrating is even where youth participation and consultation is happening, or research into young people's experiences of technology, we're cherry picking findings that very much suit a hyperbolic narrative about their experiences online. And then we're using that as the basis for policy that will define all of our existence and all of our experiences of technology, not just young people's. And so that's the first thing, is to actually honor lived experience. And honoring lived experience means going back to the source and asking if the conclusion that you've drawn is correct. It means involving young people at every step of the way in the process. It means not speaking for them, not choosing a quote and then allowing that, like taking it out of context to serve your own agenda. And we know, so at the moment, that young people's voices are needed now more than ever. And as I mentioned, we're using our National Youth Collective as a vehicle for developing a participation model that can be scaled more widely. And so we're developing participation principles like some of the ones I'm just naming: on lived experience. We need to remunerate young people for their time. We need to build their capacity to contribute. So this isn't about youth market research where we shove young people in a room for a single session and we mine them for their opinions on a product. This is about actually teaching them how the product works, teaching them the complexities of the landscape, giving them some co-design skills, and understanding the parameters of the market, understanding the limitations of the kind of maybe the external landscape, so that they can actually meaningfully contribute, rather than just saying, wow, these are fantastic ideas, when we're fully aware that those ideas actually aren't realistic and aren't possible. So we're equipping them with the capability to meaningfully contribute. And these are some of the principles that I think will take youth consultation much further into youth leadership in online spaces.
I love that. And just, yeah, one thing I was involved in a few years ago is with Headstream, which is a youth organization in the US. And it was about tech people being given a youth mentor. So not the other way around. We were literally being told what to do by young people. I am still friends with my mentor. She's amazing. And I will bring her in as often as I can because I learnt more from those conversations with her, because it wasn't consultation. It was critical friendship. It was great. There was learning on both sides. As she's now just finished college and going into a career, that relationship is so valuable and I will always cherish that. But to be able to scale that would be amazing.
Yeah, it's I spend a lot of time. I have 4 teenagers of my own. I spend a lot of time in the undergraduate college classroom, and I want to go back to something that you said earlier, is just about how this current generation of young people is just, seems to be so seems to be actively doing what they can to dismantle domination, hierarchy, the really problematic, troublesome power relationships that really seem committed to that. But then on the other side, at the same time, we also have a lot that are as the media puts it, end up down the rabbit hole into a kind of radicalization, as some people would call it. Other people might, probably those who are doing the radicalizing, might not call it radicalization. I know that I tried to make it even-handed and got just as oh well. I can't hide where I stand.
Rules are us.
But I'm curious, just to hear your thoughts about the generation as a whole, the current crop of young people, because I think in some ways, I don't know whether or not to read it as divided as all of the adults around the world seem to be right now, or are we really seeing a surge of difference from young people? What's your take? I mean, obviously we're all just guessing on this, so just what's your guess?
Yeah, I mean, our presenters, I can speak to what they're seeing in schools, and working in schools all over Australia, there are some pretty untouched pockets of our country. And so, you do really see a divide even just between metropolitan and regional areas. And there are some pretty remote areas too. And so, we're hearing absolutely that there's this growing and glowing literacy around, dismantling power, around world politics. I heard a wonderful researcher academic at Origin, an Australian youth mental health organisation, Imo Bell, and she talked about the idea that social media is the window through which young people are seeing issues around the world, and actually that current conversations around social media bans and restrictions are merely akin to just drawing the blinds. So saying, do we want to draw the blinds on young people's view of these very challenging issues, and in fact that are really, really fracturing their sense of ideological justice, and all of that kind of stuff. So I think there is this friction and this tension and agitation. I think young people are expecting better, and they have access to more information. They have access to an explosion of diverse viewpoints, and they have a vehicle to organize, and that's technology. So I think more than ever, there's that sense that they are powerful. On the other hand, and we're seeing this more and more in regional communities, we're also seeing this kind of, rise of actually, like, I describe it as violence. And there's a lot of isolation and exclusion, and young people who are disenfranchised, and who have been fed information online that says you are disenfranchised because of women or because
Yeah.
of cultural minorities, or
Oh yeah.
yeah, off the back of a couple of years of some pretty intense isolation through the pandemic, you can
Yeah.
see that how vulnerable young people already were, and that this isn't about any singular experience, that your experience of technology as a young person depends on such a range of factors, not your geographic location, not your age, not your gender, not your sexuality or culture, not your faith, but actually all of those factors. And that's why I think we need to take an intersectional view of young people, that they're not a homogenous group, but that, yeah, in fact, some people have been very vulnerable, and actually kind of we've missed them. We've failed to catch them and make sure that they're held in our efforts to bring them on a journey of creating an awesome digital world. And so, yeah, I think there are actually those. I wouldn't want to reduce it to two narratives, but I think there are actually two really simple contrasting narratives, and of course many others that are happening in this space. I think it's a really good observation.
So, Lucy, this is a question that comes up quite often with our guests. We've talked a little bit about the whole space of tech, good, bad, ugly. You've shared a little bit of your feelings on it. There's a lot of push at the moment about, banning mobile phones, cell phones in schools, and, banning kids under certain ages from social media. What's your take on that?
Yeah, this conversation is very live at the moment. I think that a lot of the conversations around trying to protect young people actually run the risk of violating and stepping in on young people's participatory rights. Not only that, I'm concerned that they could cause more harm than good. That as we know, young people are, of course, using technology not just as a vehicle to compare themselves to others, or develop an unhealthy self view, but also actually, and more predominantly, to form connection and creative expression and communities and all of that kind of thing. And one of the things that I think is really interesting and overlooked here is the experiences of young people who are already marginalized, who already might face difficult experiences offline. And I know that over the past few years, the eSafety Commission has actually released a whole body of research looking into some of these groups. I think there was a paper on LGBTQIA young people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people, and one on young people with a disability as well. And they found across all of those studies that these cohorts definitely experience higher rates of hate speech online. And given the significant negative mental health impacts, you could build a case that, that it's social media causing harm. However, these groups also experience more hate speech offline, exponentially. And what the studies have shown is that they're using technology to seek emotional support, even when they experience hate speech, to make friends, to access vital health information, and also physical and sexual health information, mental health information as well. They're discussing social and political issues online, and they're much more likely to be connecting with people from different backgrounds online. So, when you think about the implications for these groups, we may actually be cutting them off from vital support that they have nowhere else to find. And of course, that logic applies to young people more broadly. So, yeah, I'd love for us to start with the groups that we say we're aiming to protect the most. If we're presenting young people as vulnerable, let's start with those vulnerabilities. And actually, I think we'll find time and time again that they're finding very innovative ways to navigate the risks and challenges that they experience online, and actually find like all of the joy that they're not able to find in their offline lives as well.
I mean, I hear that all the time at Roblox. I've talked previously about some of my work and how we are trying to support different diverse groups of Roblox users, neurodivergence and things like that. So I 100% agree with you. And, we always say it takes a village. This is down to all of us, and it's all about the media literacy. It's about empowering the families and the supporters. But the large part of that for me is I work for a tech company, and we still have more to do to enable those safe, positive spaces for young people to get that help, to be able to find their communities without the harm, or at least to help them to feel supported when they're seeing those harms. But thank you, Lucy. That was amazing.
I know that some of our National Youth Collective will probably be hearing this, and they probably will listen to it when they come out. And, I think before, Jordan, you were talking about how much you've learned from this emerging generation. And the past nearly 20 years of my life has been a crash course in accountability to other people's lived experience. And so I just wanted to say thank you to them for educating me and for being like the voice and the central wealth of experience and expertise that we have at Project Rockit. And yeah, they are the people that inspire me to keep kicking on in these spaces as well. Absolute legends. So yeah, shout out to the National Youth Collective.
Yes,
Yay.
that.
Yes.
Amazing.
You've given us a whole lot to think about. I want to thank you so much for coming, for taking the time to come and talk to us. I know, there's a lot of bullying, so you must be a very busy person. And so I'm grateful for the work that you do, and I'm grateful for the time that you've spent with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
That was amazing, Lucy. Thank you so much. And thank you not just to you and your sister, but all of the people that you're bringing up through the organization. I do see the difference that they're all making. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lovely chat.
Into the Digital Future has been brought to you by Roblox and the Joan Gans Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop.
Presented by Jordan Shapiro and Laura Higgins.
Supported by our editor, John Didado.
And our technical producer, Matt Clark.
For more information, visit cooneycenter.org/future. Thanks for listening.